Hi, I'm Clark on Temptress. Today we're going to continue our series to find the best inexpensive lithium batteries available. This guy is the 400 amp hour VoltGo. It has every feature you've ever heard of. This is a really cool battery. This thing is the Humvee of batteries. Is it worth its price though? If you've been watching through this series, you know that I have this little device called a bank manager, and it lets you charge lithium correctly. It lets you mix it in with your current lead system if you have one without changing any charge controllers. And in short, it's the reason for this series of videos, because people want to buy one of those and they want to buy some lithium batteries, and they ask me what batteries they should buy. And my answer was, dumbly, I haven't a clue because I hadn't done the analysis. So we're doing the analysis. We're going through these batteries and we're going to see what's what and what's worth having and what's not. Even if you guys don't enjoy it, I've enjoyed the hell out of it because I've learned so much. You can read about them, but actually tearing them down and messing around with what happens to them electrically inside and how they react to the world, there's a lot to be learned. And I'm hopefully sharing that in these videos so we can all learn it without having to buy batteries and tear them down. Let's go into this one. Down below this video, go to the description and really do this. I know most people never touch the description, but really do this. It's very helpful. Go down to the description and go into the leaderboard. Take a look at that. It'll be all the batteries we've reviewed, links back to their reviews and all that. How to buy them as cheaply as possible that we've found. This one, for example, is not going to be available on Amazon. So we have a link right to their battery site. Hopefully I'll have a discount coupon there for you. And all the analysis and all the prices and all of that kind of stuff. If you look there and you compare this battery, you will find that this battery, by comparison, is frightfully expensive. This 400 amp hour battery costs $2,000. And when they first asked me to do a review on it, I'm like, no, that's just crazy expensive. But then I realized it's on the order of half the price of a Battleborn. It seems to be done at a very high level. We're going to find out. And it has features that a lot of batteries don't have. One feature in particular is it has an internal heater. Now, if you've watched the other videos, you know that one of the concerns with a lithium iron phosphate battery is if they get below freezing and you charge them, you can destroy them. So if you're going to be in a place where you could have your batteries frozen, for safety, you have to have some kind of precaution. Now, that can just be you being smart enough to turn it all off, but it could be getting a battery that has an ability to shut itself down if it's too cold and just not accept a charge. And a few batteries have that feature. This battery does a really cool thing. If you try to charge it when it's frozen, it will redirect the charge energy to an internal heating blanket and warm itself up. And then when it's adequately warm to safely take a charge, then it'll take a charge. Now, a lot of guys that are doing this kind of thing aren't on boats in the tropics because, honestly, that's the silliest feature in the world for a boat in the tropics. They're in a cabin up on a mountaintop somewhere. That feature is like really important. So just going through the use case, let's say you have some solar panels, it's cold at night, everything froze, you're not even at your cabin. The sun came out in the morning, even though it's still freezing outside, and melted the snow off the solar panels. You know, that happens. Suddenly the panels make power. They try to put it into these batteries. This battery says, nope, I'm frozen. And then it heats itself up, and then in an hour or half hour or whatever, it starts taking power. Everything's working great. That could be running the telemetry that tells you about your cabin. It can be doing all kinds of stuff you want it to do. So anyway, because of that feature, I decided it might be worth the extra money. Well, I got this thing, and as Emily calls it, this is kind of the Humvee of batteries. It's really, on the outward appearance, well made. We should take a look at its size and dimensions and stuff. So let's talk about its dimensions. First off, its weight. There's a lot of cells in here. They're heavy. This thing weighs 90 pounds, and 90 pounds is nothing to be toyed with. Okay, this is an empty box. The real battery is here, and we'll be tearing the real battery apart. but they sent me a next empty box because they wanted me to show you something. They have this feature where the handles come off, and there are these plates in the side, and you can take these plates off, put two batteries together and lock them together. And they insisted on sending me not just a real battery, the real one's right here, but this empty case, just so I could show you that feature. Well, I'm not gonna bother setting it up. I don't have enough table space. And you're all bright enough to realize, but this plate comes right off, and these plates are aluminum, really well made, good and solid. I had them off earlier. And if you put two of them on, you could have this massive battery. You take these things that look like handles off, flip them around, and they can be the tie down. So you can lock the batteries down really easily. If you had it against the wall, you could put this one here and bolt it to a wall. It's got this real kind of a off-roading look to it with that, but I think it's worthwhile. Now let's give it a measure up. As usual, I measured to the case top, but in this case, the terminals are kind of recessed. So this will be the right height. And I get that as 9 3/4 inches, which is like 25 centimeters. The width of it is coming right out to the edge here, 12.9, which is just a tad under 33. And the width is 18.11 inches, 46 centimeters. Features. Now, we've already talked about an internal heater. That's pretty cool. Along with the internal heater, of course, we have cold weather protection. That kind of goes without saying because it would have to know its internal temperature. It has Bluetooth and a Bluetooth app that's very nice to look at. Has this too. There are these waterproof connectors with RJ45s, you know, Ethernet type plugs on them. Looking through it, it claims that it does RS485, which is kind of a serial connection, and CAN bus. What that really means, I'm not certain. I went through the app and all the information I could find was it has a setting for Victron. So what I'm assuming is CAN bus is the same as NMEA 2000. So this probably can tie into NMEA 2000, and then Victron should be able to find out things about the battery over a hard wire. Maybe they're still developing the software and this is for future expansion. Not exactly sure. Other thing it has is a nice switch here. And I found that if you turn the switch off, not only does the Bluetooth go down and the battery, you know, go off, it really goes off. The BMS goes off and these are cold. There's just no chance of a short or anything. It's kind of nice having that switch for that reason. If this was your basic Chinese battery, and this is a Chinese battery, but this seems to be a step above, I'd be concerned with the switch because if switches fail, you know, and if that switch were to fail, you're out of luck. But this case is really easy to open. It has screws all around it, and you take the screws out, you should be able to pop it open with a nice seal. And that boils down to, if something as silly as a switch failed, you go inside and just short out the switch, and now you got an on battery. So bells and whistles are sometimes a bad thing, but as long as you can work past them, it's a good thing. Last thing I want to do before I toss this aside is I've been kind of dying to know. The plastic feels a little better. It's ABS, I can kind of tell. I'm trying to figure out if there's like glass fiber in it because it kind of has that look. So the way to tell is do this. I'm going to cut it and I'm going to listen very carefully. Nope. If you have glass fiber in your plastic, kind of make a tick, 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 tick noise with your knife when you cut it. This doesn't. So it's not glass fiber reinforced, but I tell you, it's a solid case. Okay, let's put this aside. Let's get the monster on the table. I'll do that off camera because I'll be grunting and groaning. And let's take it apart, see what's inside. Okay, got it on the table. This thing is heavy. And it's hot here in the Dominican Republic, so I am a sweaty mess. Well, let's get inside. It's got Allen wrench, bolts, and there's a whole bunch of them. This looks to me like it's pretty darn waterproof. It's got seals and I'm fully expecting a gasket around this lid when I get it off. Okay, well, this all looks nice. Lots and lots of cells and very little airspace, so they used all the space they had available. I'm not going to pull the batteries out of this case. I'm sorry if you want to see them, but it weighs almost 100 pounds and my back is just more precious than your video. But I can see everything and I'll describe it. This is the BMS. It is what makes sure that the cells don't go out of spec and actually destroy themselves. As I often say, it is not a device to charge and control the charge of the cells. These only shut off when damage has already started to happen. You need something that's smarter than this on a day-to-day basis. That's what the bank manager's for. But you need one of these because if things go bad, this is what protects you from the cells venting and just destroying themselves. The BMS has a number on it. It is an SP04 SO65 version 1, and it seems to be rated on the device for 300 amps. They claim it's a 200 amp rated BMS, but it looks like this one has a 300 amp BMS in it. You probably should stick with what they said as far as how much you draw out of it because, you know, wires. Speaking of wires, they have 3 6-gauge wires running to everywhere, and that's plenty for 300 or 200 amps. Let's see, we've got that, and then we have this other board. Let me take a second to look at this and see what's going on. You can learn a lot when you look at the silk screen and you look at all the labels the engineers have put on it to help themselves when they debug. Okay, I think I know what this is. So the BMS puts out some data, and this thing can pick that data up, and then this thing translates it into what it wants to send out on those serial lines we talked before. So this would be what can talk to a Victron, for example, assuming that it can do that. This guy is also connected to this little device here, which I recognize as a Bluetooth radio and antenna. So that's how it talks to your phone and tells your phone what's going on in the battery. And the last thing I'm going to call attention to is this pole. This is a pretty substantial connection, and if you trace this down, it's black here, so that would be switching ground to the heaters. So that runs to this heater. You can't quite see it, but it's underneath all this. And then it serially runs to this heater strip, and you can see all of this. And then it comes out and it goes right to the common positive. So when this thing switches this on, it can redirect the incoming charge to the heater and heat up the battery nice and safe before it lets the actual cells take power. Now cells, there are 16 cells. They're well locked together here with some nice clamps. There's some head spacers over here made of plastic that'll take some shock so that if you were to punch the side and dent it, you wouldn't actually be punching the cells. 16 cells for a battery this size would imply they're all 100 amp hour cells, which is pretty common. I think all the batteries coming through here have been 100 amp hour cells, barring the one that had the little bitty cells. I like the look of it. Looks like they did a good job. Usually when I've opened up one of these Chinese batteries, it smells strongly of solvents. And this one initially smells like lithium batteries, you know, ones I've just bought in, ones cases that I open up and put together myself. It doesn't have that really strong smell, but it probably has most to do with the other ones, all the foam they had shoved into the box to use up the space. This one has no foam inside it. It's got intelligent structures to protect the battery, but they didn't waste a lot of space. I mean, they couldn't have made this case more than this much smaller safely. So they've done like the number one thing that I ask is don't waste our space on our boats with batteries that are just full of airspace. Looking at the lid, I see a couple vents. In fact, they say vent right here. So I guess that's in case one of the cells inside vents. They built a pretty solid case. It probably could actually go pop if there wasn't a way for the pressure to come out. So I guess that's why they did that. Yeah, I can't see any faults. I like it. I think it's time now that we push it a little hard. I charge all my batteries with the bank manager. I charge them up until that hockey stick starts forming, you know, where the voltages start going up. I do it in a way that these guys just can't do it. They don't have the facilities to do it. But once in every battery's life that comes by this desk, I push it until this guy cries uncle and gives up. And we're about to do that. And then in doing that, we're going to take a look at all the individual cell voltages. Now, I could get to the cells. Actually, I can get to the cells, but I think I'm just going to rely on the BMS reporting the intercell voltage because I can just pick it up with my phone. It's just easier for me. And there's no reason for that to be wrong. So let's do it. Let's put some power into this. This is my little power supply I've set up, and a mess because there's only so much room on a boat. But anyway, this can put 5 amps out, and we're going to use that to overcharge the battery a bit, or charge the battery a bit. Put that on there. Get on there. All right. And this time, I am not going to cause a big spark. I'll turn on the power supply first. So now that's at 14.7, and I'll hook that on. I'm going to hook it on here. It's the same as hooking on here. You can see this goes to here. I just get a better access. Come on.
Stereo just went off.
Okay. And let me turn it up all the way. Okay, we're putting out 5 amps. Now I need my phone. Let me find it here. Oh, thank you, Emily. Of course, we're using it as a secondary camera monitor right now. Let me flip over to that app. So here's the VoltGo BMS app. Let me connect to it. You push this little thing that looks like the Bluetooth deal, and you get a list of batteries in range. That's ours. And here we go. It says it's charging. It says it's currently at 100%. That's never going to be perfect. It's taking in power. Actually, it is at 100% because I already charged this with the bank manager to 100%. So I like the idea that it agrees with me. It's at 13.63 volts right now, taking in, it says 4 amps, but I'm actually feeding it 5. Oh, now it says 4.8. Looks like that's a little slow and maybe not super accurate, but 1/10 of an amp on something of this size, doesn't mean much at all. It says it's 32 degrees Celsius or 89 degrees Fahrenheit in the case, and that's correct. Let me go into detail mode. Detail mode, I get 3 different thermostats, 33, 32 degrees. And what's important here is I get to see the cell voltages. So I'm sure you can't see this because it's so small, but 3.416, 3.416, 3.413, and 3.404. Very little difference now, but as the voltage goes up, these will kind of track away from each other. We're going to run through this charge and then take a look at it and see how close they are. Usually, if it's more than off by 1/10, I think that's too far. While it's going up, I'm going to talk about the bus bars that connect all the cells. So like this bus bar right here, you can't really see it, is all of the first cell negatives. And then there's another bus bar here that goes over to this set through that cell into here. These are all aluminum. I scratched them a bit with my knife, and my knife can cut it without messing up its edge, so we know it's not steel, but that would be stupid anyway. It comes down to it's going to be aluminum or copper. Copper's expensive. Aluminum's fine as long as you have a lot of it, you know. You probably need twice as much, but for 200 amps, they've got a lot of it here. And then they take this bus bar and wrap it. They put it in some insulator, wrap it all the way around to the top of this pair. Then there'd be a bus bar across the bottom, and of course up to what we can see now. So that's the trail of the power through it. Again, good job. Okay, still charging. We're up to 14.2 now and rising. The little lights all over here also tell us things. This last one is labeled run, and I think it's blinking significant that things are going. I noticed when I discharged it, it would blink, and when I charge it, it blinks. But it's just solid on when the battery's just sitting there. This red light I expect to come on when the thing goes into protect mode and shuts itself down. Okay, 6.83 is now the high cell. Oh, it just went into protect at 14.57 volts. And the cell volts are 3.674, 3.675, 3.628, and 3.586. So that's real close. These are not a problem. Now what we're going to do is we're going to discharge it hard. I'll discharge it at 200 amps, and we will look at it with a thermal camera and see what gets hot. And then I'm going to recharge it with the bank manager. So to 100%, none of this crazy high voltage stuff, just until it's at full. And then I'm going to run it through a discharge cycle, and I'll probably have a different shirt by then, because that will literally take days with my equipment. But we'll run it through a calibrated discharge source, and when we're done, we will have an answer to how many amp hours this was able to give us. And then we will talk about whether it's a good battery or not. All right, we're back here in the aft cabin now. I've got this massive battery hooked up to my inverter. My inverter's only a 3,000 watt inverter. And I was wrong earlier when I said this battery is only set up with a BMS that can put out 200 amps. They actually rated it 250, and we found from the BMS itself a sticker that says 300. This inverter, I can only put a little over 200 amps out of it through the inverter. So, well, that's a lot of power. So we're going to do the test at that level. Like always, we've got our FLIR camera here so we can see what the temperature is and what things get hot. I haven't started anything really yet, but let's get a before picture. Okay, we got our test set up. I have an amp meter hooked onto all the positives together so we can see the amps going out. Right now it's about 1.8 amps. That's just the standby of that big inverter. And we have 13.46 volts coming out of the battery. Take a look at the heat to start with. Remember, this device always shows the hottest thing as white. It's kind of a sliding scale. My meter is 54 degrees. It's because it's right in the hot sun. So we'll just have to remember some of these things are preloaded with heat just from the fact that we are in the Dominican Republic. 32 degrees seems to be the background temperature, and that's what the battery is for the most part right now, except where the sun's boiling on it. I'm going to run 2 of these heat guns. I've got another one in the other room to split the load into different wiring. I'll turn that one on full and adjust this one probably all the way up too. Let me tell you about something stupid I did. I put that heavy battery on top of the tool chest. I wired it all up with basically every wire that I had with terminals on it, because this is a lot of power and my wires have been substandard up till now. And then realized my heat guns are in the tool chest. So I borrowed from friends. So it's great having friends to borrow stuff from. Thank you, Sunita and Brock. You saved me like an hour and a half work. Thanks. Okay, we've got one heat gun on now. Let's take a look. So we're drawing 104 amps. I'm gonna turn this one on, and I'm gonna stick it out the window because it's crazy hot. That brings us up to 230 amps. 234 amps. That's about all you can get out of a 3,000 watt inverter anyway. So the inverter might pack up, but let's see what we start getting. Got the thermal camera back on here. Just that early heat load so far, but we wouldn't expect anything yet. Starting to see a little glow come out of the BMS and the wires. But geez, the sunlight is the hottest thing in the room right now. So 230 amps at 12.8 volts, which is more or less what it's holding right now at the start, is a lot of power. It's just shy of 3,000 watts. So let's hope that my inverter is up to the task, and we'll let this run for a while. That screeching is my inverter. It overheated. We're gonna have to bring this test down a notch, but we got 8 minutes out of the battery, putting out 3,000 watts. That's pretty close to its rating. Let's take a quick look with the temperature probe. As expected, the inverter's hot. Just about 100 Celsius at the negative probe. My wire is way too small there, I guess, even doubled up. Okay, looking in the battery itself, the only hot spot that I see is right at the terminals. And it's not even that hot. It's like 10 degrees Celsius above ambient. And I'll tell you, the reason it got hot at that end and not the other end is because it's hooked to my rather crappy wires. I'm just not equipped to move this kind of power from such a big battery at its limit. I'm going to have to invest in some like double out wire to do this test properly. Battery itself's doing fine. We'll give the inverter a chance to cool down, and then we will run the tests the rest of the way at a more reasonable power level, but still lots and lots, like 2,500 watts. The power amperage was right all the time. The voltage got down to about 12.7 at the least of what I saw. That's really good, but that's expected because this battery just has so much reserve. The BMS has, like, you know, barely warm to the touch. I don't think we're going to have any problem with this battery thermally whatsoever. Everything's really stout, and it's kind of already derated because it can only put out that 3,000-ish watts with its own BMS, but it has almost twice as much capacity compared to the others as far as actual cell size. So I don't think we're going to see any real heat there. The bus bars are real big. Everything looks just powerful in there. Okay, I've been running this now for 15 minutes. I did tone it down to 180 amps. Still a big number. No limitation on the battery. This was a limitation on my inverter. Let's take a look at temperatures. Well, first off, let's notice that it's still at 12.8 volts, drawing 180 amps for, oh geez, 15 minutes. Now, the hottest thing in here is right up where my wires connect, and that's only 50 degrees Celsius, so you wouldn't even feel pain. And that's actually my fault. I'm conducting heat into their wire. All the rest of this is, let me see if I get a reading. So the hottest next thing is 44 degrees. 44 degrees is nothing. It's 35 degrees or so right in the cabin. So it's not even getting warm. I see nothing wrong with this thermally, except that it's making the room so hot I can barely stand it. So I'm shutting everything down, and you should hear things better now. Let's do the next step, which is I'll charge it back up with a bank manager to full 400 amps, and then I'm going to run it through a long discharge. It'll literally take days at my 15 amp discharging rate until I find out how many amp hours are in that battery, and then I'll report back to you. All right, we have spent 2 days discharging this battery through a 12 amp load. Got some good numbers though. It is just a really, really huge battery. So let's see how it did. The battery discharged, and the final amp hour count was 408 amp hours, so that's like 2% over what we bought, so that's a pass. That's a good score. It had 5,309 watt hours total. My device actually watches the volts and the amps and multiplies it on a going basis. Usually a battery's voltage drops as you discharge it, and this one didn't as quickly. And it's probably just because the buses and the wiring and everything are just so big in this battery. So anyway, it put out more watts than expected, but only a little more amp hours than expected. Good on that. What else did I learn from this study? Well, at the end, the battery voltages, or the cell voltages, were 2.353, 2.761, 2.663, and 2.571. What does that give us? Well, the highest one was 2.571 and the lowest was 2.353. That gives us a larger differential in cell voltages than we got at the high end. That's telling, and it's good. It's telling in that I really suspect that, unlike every other Chinese battery we've tested, someone actually manually balanced these batteries, and they did what we call a high balance. So you balanced them at the top, and then when you discharge them, they are all different. I mean, manufacturing isn't that precise of a science. So they have to separate, and having them separate at the bottom is generally better than having them separate at the top. The logic being you fully charge more often than you fully discharge. So this guy has every look of a battery that someone actually put the effort into making it just that much better. And I give them big points for that. That's great. Kind of got the idea that if they did that right, they probably did 5 other things right that I don't even know about. And anyway, like this battery. In fact, I've said this a couple times in the reviews, but I mean it this time. I've said, hey, I really like that battery. It's going to be part of Temptress's battery. I'm going to augment it, put a second bank manager in, and have multiple lithium banks. And then somebody in the Bay really needs a battery, and I don't really need another battery, so it went that away. And then I found another one I was going to do it with. Well, this one is ours, no questions. I'm not giving this one up. I like this one. It has that heating feature that I have no reason to need in this Bay, but of course no one else does either. Maybe someday we stop sailing and maybe this battery goes up a mountain house with us or something. Anyway, I think it has a lot of coolness to it, and it's going to become our battery. So let's see how it stacks up on the leaderboard. Capacity. As I said, really well done, 408 amp hours. That's an excellent. Cells, excellent, maybe excellent plus. Build quality, really excellent. This thing is just built solid. I love that you can screw the top off. You don't have to break glue joints or anything. So if you did ever go inside, you could. There's not really a lick of extra space inside, so they didn't waste space. This is a big case, but I mean, this is bigger than, well, it's like 4 of the little cases, and it's only about the size of 2 of them. So that's really great. So case, excellent. The company, we're going to give them a good. I bet they'll be just fine to work with when you buy batteries from them. They're new, and the whole setting up a review was kind of lawyery. No one else has asked me to actually sign a contract. They did. But maybe that bodes well that they dot the I's and cross the T's. So company, good. Cost to value, well, that's a tricky one. This is by far the most expensive battery I've reviewed. It's 38 cents a watt hour. We've got batteries that are in the high 20s, and they're great batteries. They work just fine. It's a lot cheaper than some of the really well-known batteries like Battleborn or something like that. So, that's great. It has features that if you need, it's probably the battery to buy. If you really have a case for heating inside your cell, you're in a very cold place, or this is going into a motorhome or something, and you might be traveling to a freezing area or putting it in storage, I'd feel really good knowing it had that heat blanket inside and it can just take care of itself and keep functioning. But if I'm on a boat in the tropics, that's kind of pointless. So like many things, you only should buy what you need. But I think if you need the things this battery does, its value is high. So I'm going to give it a great score there. So I like this battery. If you like this video and you'd like to learn more about different batteries, please go down to the description of the video, click on the leaderboard. You'll see all the reviews I've done, all my notes that I might have been put in afterwards, and hopefully you find stuff you like there. If you can give this video a like, I'd really appreciate it. And if you've got anything to say about the batteries or just want to say, hey, I read all the comments, please comment. And if you want to talk deeper about this, you have questions about batteries that I'm just not answering in these videos, we do have a Patreon page, and there's levels of the Patreon page where you get my individual help. Anyway, thanks for watching, and bye from Tempter.